Hey guys, this is Fernando doing another video for Modern Survivalist. In this case, I want to talk about the 357 SIG, which is my favorite caliber for handguns. It's been for a long time my option. I used to carry a Glock 31, and it's really not one of those popular calibers. Mostly people will go for 9, some 40 Smith & Wesson, some 45 ACPs. 357 SIG, it's sometimes, in my opinion, misunderstood. Some people even think it's hype when it's really not the case, not when you understand a little bit more ballistics. And before I get even further in this video, if you're happy with your 9mm, go with that. The margin of difference is small enough that this is more about being very specific and wanting the best thing there is. And if you're just a hater that wants to put down, you're really not going to be changing my mind. You're not, and you're especially not going to be changing facts, which is what I'm going to be discussing here and explaining, which some people maybe don't understand this quite well. Why is it that I think that the 357 SIG is the best caliber you can go for when you want to have the best of the best? In my case, that was a Glock 31. Glock 357 SIG in my book was the best combination for when you want the best of what you can carry. Firearms, handguns in general are not the most powerful type of firearm you can have. So I am of the idea that your handgun should be the best it could possibly be in several aspects. First of all, power. Power and capacity. This is a combination. Sometimes a certain handgun caliber may be very powerful, but it lacks in other ways. Maybe it's even too powerful. For example, a 44 Magnum, very powerful round, but at the same time, capacity is low. It's not as easy to handle. The type of firearms you have for 44 Magnum will have certain limitations, mostly because of the size of them. And it's lacking, while it has lots of power, it's lacking on several other aspects. In terms of power specifically, let's compare, for example, Carbon. Maybe you will agree with me. Carbon is, I'd say, is a good enough manufacturer. It's one of the best options you can have. Take a look at Carbon DPX rounds, and let's compare for a second 9mm and 357 SIG. Hey, let's compare 9mm plus P, which would be realistically what you would end up carrying. The speeds, and in this case, Carbon DPX, these would be 9mm plus P in 115 grains compared to 357 SIG in 125 grains. So already here we have an advantage in terms of weight for 357 SIG. Guys, ballistics are incredibly complex, and even the ballistic experts in most cases cannot quite put the finger on many things. I've read everything that there is to be read. I am a firearms instructor, and not the type of firearms instructor that just gets a little certificate or diploma handle. I did quite a bit of studying, more than most people have done. All right, and I'll be the first in telling you there's tons and tons of research. Lots of that research clashes with others. Many of the conclusions that some guys come up with clash with the conclusions other people have. So there's quite a bit of debate on exactly what it is in terms of stopping power. Especially, we can all easily measure speed, bullet weights, and such. But the problem is when you start comparing the interface between the bullets and the people. People are not nearly as easy to study and comprehend as projectiles. Yeah, a projectile, you can weight it, you can measure how fast it's traveling. Now, when you put the human factor in play, it becomes quite much more complex than some people may lead you to believe, right? What we do know, basically, and trying to keep this video within a reasonable length, is that the faster the projectile is traveling and the more the bullet weights, the better. Those are pretty much things everyone agrees on. Big and fast is always better than little and slow. All right, so that's basically is something we can be pretty much sure about. Now, what is the speed of these a 9mm plus P? In this case, it is 1250 feet per second. Now that's pretty fast. 1,250 feet per second, 9mm. That's pretty good. That's the advantage of shooting a good load such as Corbin DPX 9mm plus P. Very good. Is it gonna be a good idea for self-defense? No doubt whatsoever. Now, if you want to have even a little bit more power than that, 357 SIG is giving you that option. 357 SIG round is going to be traveling, this one in particular, it's going to be traveling at 1,350 feet per second. Yeah, now, yes, you know, that's only 100 feet per second more. Well, it's not only just 100 feet per second more, you're also shooting a heavier projectile as well. So that's also a factor. In terms of energy, you will have 399 feet and pounds on 9mm versus 505 feet pounds in 357 SIG. Now, yeah, it's 400 versus 500. Well, that's actually a 25% increase in power. And again, if you look at it from that perspective, it is, you know, it is noticeable. It is there. It is going to be more powerful, more efficient, and better at stopping people than 9mm. And here is where lots of guys will jump in, some very knowledgeable, some not so much, and say, well, placement is the only thing that matters, what you're shooting at with. And no. Simple answer is no. It's, you know, yes, placement is, you know, if we have our little guy here, and I'm gonna be shooting the pinky finger. I'm gonna be shooting the pinky finger with a 44 mag, and I'm gonna be shooting in the head with a 22 long rifle. Yes, of course. Now, when things get a little bit more complicated, more in detail, you know, you're placing your shots somewhat in the center of mass where you should be doing that, and maybe not getting a quite perfect hit and such. That's where things start changing, and where more power, more velocity, more bullet weight, better bullet design is going to be making a difference. You know, full metal jacket, it's not going to be the same as jacket hollow point, in spite of having the same speed and the same weight. It's going to be having different dynamics once it hits the body, which at those speeds it's going to be acting like, you know, going through soft tissue and such. It's, you know, those finer details. Of course, if you hit someone in the brain and the spine, doesn't matter if it's a jacket hollow point, if it's full metal jacket, but it's in this case when we start splitting hairs a little bit more, where you may want a little bit more performance, and that's entirely up to you. Now, what basically has been found out after analyzing hundreds and thousands of cases, different cases, is that one of the best rounds in terms of handgun for stopping power is a 357 Magnum, right? 357 Magnum, it's, you know, one of those rounds that has been showing the most consistent one-shot stops. By one-shot stops, we're talking about a center mass hit. There's been several guys that have studied this very seriously, done interviews time and again, and 357 Magnum in 125 grain traveling at 1,400 feet per second is one of the most efficient rounds you can shoot from a handgun. I know of a few cases in which people have been shot, and the difference between people shot in the head. I know of a case in which a guy shot in the head with a 357 Magnum. The pressure was so great that it actually popped out one of the eyes that was close to the exit wound because of the pressure inside the head. You know, it sounds silly, but it's what's showing that it's not all the same. It's not all the same. It's not the same to shoot with a 22 long rifle, 9mm full metal jacket, a good 9mm such as this one, a Corbin DPX. There are variations and there are differences. All right, so it's really not all the same. As I was saying before, it's not only about power, it's about what kind of firearm you're able to shoot your caliber out of. and also the capacity you have. One of the greatest advantages 9mm has is that you can have lots of them, right? Which is a point that, for example, 45 ACP usually lacks. Yes, you do have high capacity 45 ACP handguns, but generally they become quite a bit more bigger, more bulky. Something that's also happening, for example, on 10mm, which in some cases is very punishing both to the firearm and the shooter as well. Not as great for fast follow-up shots, and you're talking about bigger firearms and makes things a little bit less convenient. Now with 357 SIG, you will have the same capacity as 40 Smith & Wesson. If you guys don't even know what I'm talking about, 357 SIG is basically a bottle-shaped round, right? It's basically a 40 Smith & Wesson case neck down to 9mm. That's very broad terms, because the case is not the same. It's actually a little bit thicker, and if you just neck down a 40 case, you're not going to be having the same. So on the exterior dimensions, that is basically the case. And that quickly takes us to the following step, which is convenience, right? So it's pretty powerful. It's 25% more powerful than the best load you can have in 9mm plus P Corbin DPX, which for you maybe it's not that much. Maybe for some of us, 25% more is enough to make the extra effort. Also, you will have you will still have a nice capacity. You will have, for example, in the Glock 31, you will still have 15 plus 1 rounds of capacity. So you're basically talking about replicating the best 357 Magnum load in reliable, super reliable firearms such as the Glock, and having like 3 times the capacity you would have in a revolver. In terms of convenience, one of the things I like a lot about 357 SIG is that in most cases it's just a matter of swapping barrels. If you have a 40 Smith & Wesson, you can have a barrel for 357 SIG, and the same the other way around. For example, when I had my Glock 31, having a 40 Smith & Wesson barrel means that just swapping barrels allow me to shoot 40 Smith & Wesson, which is considerably cheaper, especially for practicing, for range time. So you can practice with 40 Smith & Wesson and then change the barrel and have your 357 SIG. Sounds kind of messy, but if you know how to disassemble a Glock 31, you know that it's just a matter of seconds swapping barrels. It even uses the same magazine because of the exterior shape being pretty much the same. A 40 Smith & Wesson would be like that, give or take, with a fatter, bigger bullet projectile. It's basically a neck down. So it's if you look at the barrel differences, if this is the barrel of a Glock 40, it's pretty much the same all the way through. The 357 SIG would have that neck, that bottle-shaped chamber. It's basically the same thing, but with a bottle-shaped chamber, so as to fit the bottle-shaped cartridge. All right, so it ends up being very convenient. Any 40 Smith & Wesson pistol and any 357 SIG pistol can shoot the other caliber just by changing the barrels. You don't even have to change magazines. It fits the same magazines. I use 40 Smith & Wesson magazines in my Glock with no problem whatsoever. So that makes it very simple. I suppose also for manufacturers as well, it makes it very simple to add another alternative, a different caliber, just by having a different barrel. So in that way, it's not the same thing as, for example, the 10mm, which is great, but it means that you have you need basically an entirely new gun for the 10mm. You cannot just swap barrels and go with 10mm. It's also convenience in terms of the firearm. Because of this, basically the firearm is the same. So anything that goes for a Glock 17, for example, in 9mm or the Glock 40 Smith & Wesson, anything that works, any accessory that works for the Glock 17 will work for your Glock 31 as well. I'm talking about holsters, accessories, because the external shape of the gun is the same. The Glock 31 is exactly like a Glock 17, except for in terms of external shape. So that makes it very simple and convenient. The Glock 10mm being a little bit bigger will require new holsters, new stuff, and so on. In terms of reliability, this is one of the things I like the most about bottle-shaped cartridges like the 357 SIG. Because of the bottle-shaped the bottle shape of the round, it fits very reliably into the chamber every single time. I never had a single malfunction, a single failure to feed with a 357 SIG. And if you read about it and you see what people that use it frequently have to say, they will say that it's extremely reliable, and that's very important. It's not just a minor issue. It's very important because for a firearm that's going to be used for self-defense, reliability is significant. It is going to be more reliable. It's going to be more reliable. 357 is going to be more reliable than 9mm, 45 ACP, or 40 Smith & Wesson. It's going to be feeding better every single time because of that shape. It's going to be fitting a smaller section up front. It's going to be fitting through a larger hole of the chamber as it goes in. So that's why it's so reliable. It's basically impossible to have a failure to feed. No, not impossible. It's much better than a cartridge that has straight walls, right? It's having that rifle-like reliability when feeding. In terms of accuracy, it's because it's pretty much very fast in terms of the speed as it's traveling, in terms of, especially compared to other handgun calibers, it shoots very accurately. It has a very flat trajectory. Generally, we have our guy here shooting. What a projectile does is this: it basically goes up and down like that. Some will drop more, some will drop less. 357 SIG, because of the speed, is pretty flat trajectory in comparison. That makes it very accurate. In my experience, even at close range, it is more accurate than 9mm, 40, 45 ACP. That has been my experience with 357 SIG. That has been the experience of several other people that had tried my own firearm, and what I've read online of people having that similar experience. There's even accounts of police firearms instructors that they notice a noticeable increase in accuracy when their department changed from 357 SIG, from 9mm or 40 to 357 SIG. Just putting a 357 SIG in the hands of someone that is already a good shooter with a Glock 17 and 9mm or a Glock 40 Smith & Wesson, they're going to be shooting a little bit better with 357 SIG. I don't know why. The caliber, I know that because of technical matters, it is more accurate. Now, you would think that in this case, the difference is so small that it wouldn't be noticeable from one shooter to another, just changing calibers. But in fact, it is. I shoot better and more accurately with 357 SIG than with 9, and so do other people. So it's those things that. And maybe the difference is very small. If you have the target, maybe it's the comparison is you shoot like this with 9, and with 357 SIG you just shoot a slightly smaller cluster, a clover leaf type of cluster. But it all works toward having the best of the best, right? Having the best possible power, having the best possible accuracy, having the best possible reliability and feeding. It is that way. Interchangeability, yeah, sorry for that. This should have been the barrel swapping thing. And again, it is very handy because you don't have to change the entire system. You just change the barrel, shoot. Of course, you have to be very careful of not mixing things up, because you can in fact forget the 40 Smith & Wesson barrel on, alright, and load a 357 SIG, and it's going to be firing. It's going to be straightening those walls. It's going to be tumbling out that bigger diameter barrel. The small 357 round is going to be going through there, and it's going to be damaging your barrel to some extent. So you have to be very careful of not doing that. Ideally, you would have the same firearm. two similar guns, maybe a Glock 22 and a Glock 31, and not have to change barrels so as to make that possibility of forgetting one barrel and shooting the wrong round in it, make it harder to happen. But I find it to be a very nice caliber, 357 SIG. I know there's lots of guys that think that it's hype. It's really not hype when you actually have better performance, when you have more accuracy, when you have better reliability in feeding and such. It's a matter of, do you want that? Are you willing to pay a little bit more, maybe in terms of cost, because 357 SIG is gonna be more expensive now because of this option of changing barrels. And besides, guys, what I did after some time, I started with the extra barrel. Just get a Glock 17 and you shoot with 9mm, you practice with 9mm, and you carry your Glock 31. That's gonna be the cheapest thing. And as long as you know where you're hitting with your Glock 31, and you practice with the exact same gun in terms of functionality, of user interface and feel and such. So you practice with your Glock 17 because of 9mm ammo being more cheaper and such, and you end up carrying the Glock 31. Yes, you may think, just why don't make it just more simple and stick with the Glock 17 and go with Corbin DPX 9mm plus P. Of course, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and it would be an excellent choice to have your Glock 17 with good Corbin ammunition. But if you want that little extra performance in all these things, 357 SIG is going to be giving you that. Maybe you think that the difference isn't worth it or such. The difference is still there. Everything that I mentioned here is basically facts that, especially the ballistics, you cannot argue with that. It is what it is. And you may be thinking, well, 25% isn't that much. Well, the difference between 38 Special plus P and 357 Magnum may not seem like much to someone else, but at the end of the day, when people get shot with it, it's different results. One is going to be more efficient than the other. There's a case, and besides, the people who are using 357 SIG, the Secret Service, United States Secret Service uses 357 SIG. Air Marshals use 357 SIG. There's several police departments in US that are using 357 SIG, and they are all showing more an improvement in the performance of their police officers, and they're showing an improvement in stopping power when it ends up being used on the street. There was one, I think it was in Texas, that's used by the highway patrol. This guy, there was this incident, and a 45 ACP was failing to penetrate the outer shell of a truck. The police officer had a 357 SIG as his secondary firearm, and 357 SIG did penetrate and stop the attacker where 45 ACP failed to do so. So again, very small differences. Sometimes the devil is in the details, as they say, no? So I'm the kind of guy that likes having that extra advantage when possible, Folks, that's basically it. A little talking about 357 SIG. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care, guys. Remember to subscribe if you're liking these videos. See you next time. Have a great day.